back to Impact Show. This is my 6th interview with Palmer Luckey. Actually, I got the Guinness World Record of hosting the most interviews with Palmer Luckey, so stoked to have you back. Last time I talked to you publicly was in December in front of hundreds of people at the Pacific Club. That was an epic update. Look, a lot has happened, Palmer, over the last 9 months. Tell us a little bit of an update of what you've been doing at Anduril and some of the developments your company's been going through on a public basis.
Well, we've been doing a lot of things. We won a major contract with SOCOM to do counter drone work for them, protecting bases and footprints all over the world from drone attacks. That was a $1 billion contract. It was a huge deal for Anduril. We've been involved in helping Ukraine defend themselves from Russia since the second week of the conflict. I recently got back from Kiev, going to be helping those guys for the foreseeable future.
Wow.
So we've had hardware and people there since the very beginning, and we continue to support them. And then we've got a lot of new technology in development that I can't talk about, but it's been a really good year for developing new stuff. So, and Anduril's doing really well. I'm doing well.
Right.
You know, we're making money, we're paying the bills, and we're making cool stuff. So it doesn't really get better than that.
Outstanding. I mean, when I interviewed you last, this whole conflict in Russia hadn't even happened. And now it happened, and it's just been such a fast thing. And you were in Kiev, and you also had President Zelenskyy here way before the conflict started. Right. Tell us a little bit about that relationship. Tell us about your experience in Kiev and what all that was like.
Well, so I met Zelenskyy very briefly, or very shortly after he was elected, and this was years before the conflict started. And he read about the work that we were doing with United States border security, and he was really interested in if we could apply the same AI technology to defending their borders, so that they could know what was going back and forth, what was being masked on the border, when were things coming through, providing targeting information for things that were coming through. And that was when we first met. So it's actually a much longer relationship than most people. You know, Zelenskyy and I got along before it was cool.
Right. Wondering what it was like going out to Ukraine. I mean, that's a brave thing, but I mean, what was that process like, and what was your experience like going out there?
They are really fighting hard. They've got a lot of equipment from the US. They got a lot of equipment from the United Kingdom. They've got a lot of equipment from other allies. I think that the biggest problem they have right now is that they are still much smaller in industrial capacity than Russia is. They have a lot fewer people, they have a lot less industrial capacity, and so the only way that they're going to be able to keep fighting is if we continue to help them, and that becomes really tough to do when this goes from being a 1 month war, a 6 month war, to potentially being a 3, 4, 5 year conflict.
Right.
I don't think that we have an option of just letting it go, though. We can't afford to let Russia take over Ukraine and then basically get rid of the buffer that exists between all of Europe and Russia. You know, if Russia is able to actually put all these weapon systems right up on the borders of all of our allies in Europe, it's going to be much, much harder, not only to repel them in case of an actual invasion scenario, but also they're going to be able to collect data on stealth platforms. They're going to be able to watch a lot of electronic emissions. You know, imagine if we let Russia just set up a presence right next to our military bases here in the US and watch and listen to everything that we're doing.
Right.
It becomes much harder to win in a real fight. That's the situation that we could end up in if Ukraine were to go to Russia.
Right. So they're out there defending their country. They're using our equipment, technology, munitions. What is the training like? Because I would imagine I mean, is it just a crash course to how to use all this equipment and this, billions of dollars in defense? I mean, talk a little bit about that.
Well, the good news is that a lot of this stuff was designed to be very, very easy to use. So in particular, the United States has been designing weapons platforms, not only for the use by US troops, which are relatively highly trained, but also designing weapon platforms that are very easy for us to arm our allies with, who may not speak English, they may not have the same level of technical aptitude, they may not have any military training really at all. And so we've designed these weapon systems that make it very easy for people who were many of them just ordinary civilians weeks ago to participate in a meaningful way. Like using a javelin is actually very, very, very easy. And I think that's something the U.S. has done a great job of, is building weapons platforms that we can arm our allies with rather than just arm ourselves with.
So there's an obvious question. We've been at this conflict now for 7 going on 8 months. It's been a very arduous long battle. It's just been almost like an analog war. Yet we all know that there are additional, more strength-based munitions that are available to both sides. And it could be defined as a war by proxy, where Russia is really battling Ukraine and all of its allies, which includes the United States of America, which is the strongest military power. What are your thoughts on how this is evolving? Because it kind of seems like a very slow unraveling onion, and no one wants to go to its core, because we know that that is all a potential ugly
Well, the real core
scenario.
of it, well, I mean, you talked about how it's the war against the U.S. and all of our allies, but it goes the other way too. It's not just a war against Russia, it's war against Russia and all of their allies as well. You know, Russia has entered into the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Agreement, which you have Iran, you have China, you have Russia, you have this kind of building coalition of people who are trying to build military power against the United States.
Wow.
And we're seeing Chinese technology pop up on the Russian side of this conflict over and over and over again already. And so this is not, if you want to call it a proxy war, you know, it's not like we're the ones that are the only people using a proxy. Russia, in many senses, is also a proxy for China.
Okay.
And so that's part of what really ups the stakes here. Is it's not just about Russia winning; it's about a combined Russian, Chinese, plus, Shanghai cooperative organization that is universally anti-West, anti-democracy, and that's a really dangerous thing. Way more dangerous than Putin just wanting to rebuild the Soviet Union for whatever ego reason he has, which is, I think, the surface level analysis a lot of people have. They see this as an ego-driven thing, driven by wanting to rebuild the Soviet Union.
Right.
It's actually a much larger threat than that.
Right. And just this week, and right now it's September 22nd, so to give context, Putin's just enlisted 300,000 of his own population.
That's right.
Tell us a little bit about that dynamic and what sort of psychology is going through the population of Russia, because there doesn't seem to be an intent to serving the country, but at the same time you really have no choice.
Just on top of that, one other thing that's worth noting is it's not just a random conscription of people that they're putting down. What has been happening is people who have been caught protesting in the streets early in the war, the protesters, they would arrest them. They have a much more interesting tactic now. What they do is they take video surveillance of them. They have people follow them home and confirm their identities. And then whoever those protesters are, they get a letter and a knock at the door, and they're conscripted to go straight to the front, straight to the front lines. And this has two effects. One, it means that they are more or less killing all of the people. You have very high casualty rates on frontline infantry right now. So they're basically just getting them killed, but then they're also ensuring that people don't speak out, because they'll be politically targeted for their speech and sent to die, and which means you have much what appears to be less public resistance than there is. So in terms of strategic objectives, it's a brilliant strategy. Right. In terms of long-term faith in their government, they're just burning it up.
And my last question on Russia, Putin's back is against the wall, it seems. It just seems like he's losing this war. Yep. It's a slow loss, running out of options. I never really thought of the proxy ally on the other side.
Yep.
Interesting, but it doesn't seem to be, in my opinion, it seems like there's a sense of urgency on peace and getting this thing chill from the U.S. allies supporting Ukraine. On the other side, it really seems to be the joystick is held by one man.
Right.
With his back against the wall in this desperation and this humiliation, what happens now? I mean, what are his options, and what could potentially happen in the next few months?
Tactical nukes are on the table. It's part of Russian warfighting doctrine. The United States uses nuclear weapons at a strategic level for deterrence and retaliation. Russia has them as part of their standard warfighting doctrine. So I think that could be a very interesting escalation, mostly because Russia gambled with this war in the first place, assuming that they would not get serious pushback directly from the West, and they were actually right. And I think that they probably feel like they could use nuclear weapons and not see a nuclear escalation from the West, which I think they're actually, unfortunately, probably correct on.
Wow.
And as far as having his back to the wall, we'll see. I think that it's easy to say that when it's still sunny out. I think that as you get into winter and you have all these European nations with hugely depleted petroleum reserves, we'll see how we'll see how optionless he is. I think that you're going to see billions of dollars flowing into Russia to pay for petroleum products, and that actually it's the European Union that has left themselves so dependent on Russian energy that is going to have their backs against the wall. And I think Putin is betting on that.
Wow. That's a lot of dynamics there, and we will just pray that there is a peaceful outcome to this. And looking at all the work that you've been doing at Anduril, there's been some acquisitions as well. You guys have been above ground, but there's been some maritime acquisition as well that was publicly disclosed on your website. Do you care to comment on that?
Sure. I mean, I can't get into the details, but we recently acquired a company called Dive Technologies. They build robotic underwater submarines. We brought them into Anduril so that we could combine their technology with our cutting-edge artificial intelligence and manufacturing expertise. We've already signed a deal with the Royal Australian Navy to build a number of these large robotic submarines that are able to dive much deeper than manned submarines can go, do missions that no manned submarine can do, extremely quiet, extremely stealthy. Really incredible systems, and we're going to be expanding those not just to the Australian Navy, but also to other navies around the world, including in the United States over the coming years.
Several years ago, when you first started Anduril and I interviewed you, in our first interview, you were talking about how China was really leading the pack as far as AI and machine learning for military and defense applications. Do you feel with Anduril's support, and you always kind of say, we're just a small piece of a big puzzle, but you seem to be building the cachet as a brand. Are you guys catching up? Are you reinventing that status to where the United States is now taking the lead on countries like China when it comes to tech and defense?
I think we have the lead in very specific areas on specific products, but there's, like you said, it's part of it's one puzzle piece in a much larger puzzle. We have so many systems, so many capabilities, so many allies that no one company is going to be able to catch us up. I think the one thing that we have going for us is that the United States has really great people. We have a really strong research community, and we have a lot of people who are coming here from around the world to help apply their skills in artificial intelligence to the US technology industry. So that's something you don't see as commonly in China. China's a very strong domestic AI industry, but you're not going to see people moving from other countries into China to help them, and that's an advantage the United States has had for many decades. We've always, in kind of the modern history, our war machine has always been built on the backs of not just our best people, but on the best and brightest minds from around the world coming here. And I think that we're going to continue to see that, especially in AI.
So just looking at tech globally as we round up this short interview, wanted to get your opinion on the big gamble that Meta's made on Meta, right? So it sure seems to be a lot of shareholder dollars, tens of billions of dollars. Is this really going to be the third version of the internet where people take one of your great inventions to really escape the real world to go into this alternate world? I can understand gaming and maybe some business applications around engineering, architecture. Do you see this as this iteration of part of life and society in the future?
Well, this concept of the metaverse, of a digital world that exists alongside our own, parallel to the real world, where you can live and work and play and do anything that a human can do and anything that a human can imagine doing. It's not a new idea. It's a sci-fi idea. But what the cool thing about it is, some people say, "Oh, is this like the internet? Is this the next step in technology?" And I always look at it differently. This is actually the last step in technology. Once you have perfect virtual reality and a perfect metaverse, that's it. You don't have to perfect so many other technologies. I mean, like a lot of business travel becomes irrelevant, and thus all the technologies that enhance it. So much in the field of design and modeling and telecommunications. There's so many other potential paths that become completely obsoleted by perfect virtual reality and a perfect metaverse. And so it's a long road. There's dozens of technologies that have to be stacked to make it work at that level. But the promise of it is such that it's almost impossible to imagine where it doesn't happen at some point. It's really just a matter of time. Now, I disagree with some of the tactical, specific decisions that Meta has been making in terms of what they're prioritizing, what products they're building first, which ones they're going to build later. But broadly, strategically, the idea of betting everything on not the next technology, but the final technology, the thing where if you perfect it, you don't need to perfect much else. That is, I think, a really ballsy bet that I'm actually a very big fan of. you would not see anyone else but Mark Zuckerberg making that kind of bet. And for that, he should be respected.
Right. And I was just going to ask you, do you think Mark Zuckerberg has built the perfect virtual reality?
No, I don't think he does. I don't think he thinks he has either.
Okay.
I think that everyone understands that there's a long way to go on all of this. But in a world filled with people who are investing in incrementalism and tiny iterations on what's been done, to say we're going to go for the end game, we're going to go for the last form of media that will ever exist, and we're going to manifest it through billions or tens of billions in R&D, that's really, really commendable.
Right. And, I see a parallel with the timing of Facebook turning into Meta and rebranding the name, but also when Apple changed their algorithm on retargeting of advertising to the Facebook platform, all those dollars went into R&D on creating Metaverse. I wonder if Mark Zuckerberg saw that 10 years ago when he acquired Oculus.
Well, you can go back. You can go back and read the open letter that we put out when we were acquired. For years before that acquisition, my email signature was "See you in the Metaverse."
Right.
I've signed literally hundreds, maybe even thousands of VR headsets with the phrase "See you in the Metaverse."
Right.
And that was what we wrote at the end of our open letter. We laid out our vision for where this was going and why it would matter, and at the end say, we'll see you in the Metaverse. And so this shift, people are acting like it's this new idea, but that was the entire idea of Oculus. That was the entire idea of Oculus. That's why the acquisition happened. That Facebook was not interested in buying it because they thought that it would be, some small part of their business is selling VR games to gamers. It was because they understood that VR is the final platform.
Right. Awesome. And in my final observation comment, I just wanted to bring in some of the insights that I drew from your interview in the All In podcast.
All right.
And, I really believe that all of us as entrepreneurs, the hundreds of thousands of people watching this and the members of the IMA, we all face adversity. And you opened up a part of all of us. And when you actually brought up some of the things that were said about you, it was a moment that I think will shape you as a leader. And it was, as David said, who's a great guy, it was brave. But I think beyond that, it was a moment in time where so many entrepreneurs, at a moment of weakness, get portrayed in such a way publicly that whoever the host is leverages that to increase their fan base.
Sure.
Can you just share a little bit about your observations of that moment? Because I've watched it several times, and thousands of my friends have watched it and have felt empowered by it. Can you just tell me what was going on inside you at that moment?
So for people who don't know, there was a guy who said a bunch of nasty shit about me on his podcast for years. He said I should be fired from Oculus, that I was a terrible person, that I don't care about my family, that I don't care about my employees, that I'm an idiot, that I'm stupid, that I'm a moron. There's some subset of those things that are true, but it's not all of them. And so, I had an opportunity when I was invited to speak at his conference. Right. So, I wanted to say, hey, listen, I told the audience, listen, the only reason I'm here is because of the conflict in Ukraine. And so this person who's been berating me for years and years, all of a sudden realized that he has to be nice to me and that my company does matter and that having important technology for the warfighter is something that he's going to have to support. Sure. And so, but let's look through the things that he said about me over the years.
Right.
Does this sound like a person that you should be inviting to a conference? If I'm really a horrible, horrible, evil person who's terrible in all these ways, why am I invited to be here? And the reality is, it's because I'm not any of those things. Right. And the point that I made that I guess I'll come back to is most people in my position, where they were really severely attacked by the media, by all the talking heads, and then were forced out of their companies, they tend to just disappear. They don't usually get a second chance. And so I was one of the few that was able to come up and say, hey, this is really damaging when you do this, because you're not just taking someone out of their company, you're probably removing their ability to build future things. You're now taking them out of the innovation ecosystem by dragging them down. Right. And I'm one of the very few who was able to claw my way back up. Yeah. And I was only able to do that because I had people who were willing to invest money and relationship capital into my new company, Anduril. Right. Exactly. Most people don't have that. Most people don't have a multi-billion-dollar exit under their belt that kind of forces that to be the case. And so, my advice to people is don't when people treat you like that. Because when all these things were said about me, do you know what I said in the moment? Nothing. I just, I said, you know what? I took the conventional PR advice, which is don't drag yourself down to their level. Let them say whatever they want. It won't hurt you. It won't hurt your career. And I believed those things for a while until I was fired from my own company. And then I realized it was the cumulative effect of allowing all of these people to walk all over me. And so since then, I've been extraordinarily aggressive. Anyone who comes at me with something false, if they're just saying, you know, if they're saying something is true, you know, Palmer's really abrasive. Palmer needs to lose some weight. Usually I'll let it go. But if they're going to say untrue things about me, then I need to punch back twice as hard or 10 times as hard. And eventually you teach people that you are not a soft target. It's really no different than bullying when you're a kid. You need to show them that you are not going to be bullied and that they are going to get a bloody nose if they come after you. And I think more entrepreneurs need to do that, because maybe 10 years ago, the conventional advice worked. But today, you cannot let people walk all over you, or the cumulative effect of their attacks on you will destroy your career and your ability to network, to sell, to build, maybe in ways you don't even know or see because it's behind closed doors. And that's why you need to get your story out there. You have to get your message out there, and you need to make sure that everyone knows that everyone else who's coming after you is a joke.
Absolutely, and you become a specialist in public relations. So if you're ever looking for a job, you know, you come work at KCOM anytime, okay?
I should be a crisis comm specialist, right?
Yeah. Well, and thank you so much for doing that, because it was a moment that a lot of entrepreneurs related to. It empowered all of us. And the thing I've always known about you, and the host of All In Podcast doesn't know about you, is you're a person who always tells the truth. You don't lie. You're faith-based. You don't drink, you don't smoke, you don't do drugs. You are one of the most commendable leaders that I've ever met, and you're still, you know, such a young guy. And, you know, what was so odd about that was his rebuttal to it was replaying all the things that he said about you. And it was like, wow, you're already like dug a grave for yourself. Now you just went even deeper. And it was just surprising. And he held on to that podcast for several weeks because they were probably debating on and that was really strange.
They released all the other ones, and they waited a month to release mine.
And going back to public relations, you know, if someone is speaking about you or your brand in a way that is not true, go against whoever's telling you not to fight back.
Always.
Because the thing is, and I do this for a lot of our clients, you just communicate the truth and you stay and you don't hype it up and you just give your version of it. Otherwise, people will believe this sort of fantasy description.
And the thing is, you don't have to convince everybody. You need to convince the people who are willing to listen to you if you share your side. A lot of times you have people, they would love to hear your side and they would love to hear the truth. But if you don't give them anything, then they really have almost no choice but to believe what other people are saying. So you need to give ammunition to the people who are willing to believe you, to understand what's actually going on, even if you can't convince everybody. And that's the mistake people made. They think, I can't convince everybody, therefore I shouldn't convince anyone at all.
And you know, leaders have critics, and I think there's a way to diplomatically state something about someone or someone's technology or someone's exit or anything in a way that's not a formed personal attack. And I think that's where he went so far over the line that as a host of my own podcast, I'm sitting here thinking, why would you ever do that? And by the way, we're catching up to you All In Podcast because our subscriber rates are going through the roof. Palmer, I really appreciate all that you do for me, the Internet Marketing Association. You have our 1 million+ members behind you. You're the real deal. I've been seeing you grow up. I mean, we were in your young 20s and now you just turned 30, and this is really exciting because you're getting smarter, wiser. You know, your allies are getting stronger, and we're all behind you, your family, and all that you're doing. So thank you again for being part of Impact.
Thank you so much.
All right, you got it. See you soon.